8 civilizations ruled the eastern Mediterranean at the height of the Bronze Age: the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, the Egyptians, the merchant kingdoms of Ugarit, Cyprus, Canaan, Assyria, Babylon. They traded with each other, married into each other's royal families, and wrote each other letters addressed to "my brother." Then, in the space of about 50 years, almost all of them were gone, not conquered and absorbed. Gone. Cities burned and never rebuilt. Writing systems abandoned. Entire languages falling silent for centuries. Around 1200 BC, the most connected world humanity had ever built stopped working. And the reason was not, in the end, an army. It was a supply chain. To understand what broke, you have to understand what they built. By the 13th century BC, the Eastern Mediterranean was not a collection of isolated kingdoms. It was a network. Egyptian grain fed Anatolian cities. Cypriot copper filled the holds of Canaanite ships. Baltic amber, mined at the edge of the known world, has been found in the tombs of Greek kings. In the 1330s BC, an Egyptian archive at Amarna preserved more than 300 clay tablets of royal correspondence. Kings trading gold, glass, horses, and daughters across thousands of kilometers. This was an international system with diplomacy, trade agreements, and something close to a shared elite culture. Historians call it the first golden age of globalization. Its members called it order. At the center of that order sat a single material: bronze. Every sword, every plow blade, every chariot fitting, every temple door in this world depended on it. Bronze was the steel, the aluminum, and the semiconductor of its age, all at once. And bronze had a recipe: roughly 9 parts copper, 1 part tin. That 1 part was the problem. Copper was manageable. Cyprus alone produced it in enormous quantities, and its very name would come to mean copper in later tongues. But tin was different. There is almost no tin in the Eastern Mediterranean. The nearest major sources that Bronze Age merchants could reach lay in modern Afghanistan, perhaps 3,000 kilometers from the smiths who needed it, with other deposits as far away as the tin fields historians associate with Cornwall. Every ingot traveled by donkey caravan across mountains and deserts, then by ship across open water, passing through the hands of miners, middlemen, merchants, and kings. The most important military and agricultural material in the world depended on one of the longest and most fragile trade routes humanity had ever operated. We know exactly what that dependency looked like, because one of its shipments is still on the seabed. Around 1320 BC, a merchant vessel went down off Uluburun, on the coast of modern Turkey. When archaeologists excavated it, they found roughly 10 tons of copper ingots and about 1 ton of tin. 10 to 1. The precise recipe for bronze, packed as a single cargo. Alongside it lay glass ingots, ebony, ivory, and goods that scholars trace to at least 7 different cultures. 1 ship, 7 civilizations worth of cargo. The Uluburun wreck is not just a shipwreck. It is a photograph of an economy in which everyone's prosperity was loaded into everyone else's boats. For 2 centuries, the system worked, and it made its members rich beyond anything the world had seen. Palaces at Mycenae and Pylos ran redistributive economies with scribes recording every jar of oil and every bronze tripod on clay tablets. Hattusa, the Hittite capital, governed an empire stretching across Anatolia. Ugarit, a city-state on the Syrian coast, grew wealthy simply by standing at the crossroads, taxing and shipping other people's goods. Specialization deepened. Egypt grew grain. Cyprus smelted copper. Greece produced oil, wine, and warriors. Each kingdom did what it did best and imported the rest. That is also precisely how the system became fragile. Efficiency and resilience pull in opposite directions, and for 200 years, everyone chose efficiency. Why maintain expensive local production when the network provided? Why hold reserves when next season's ships always came? The palace economies became so specialized and so interlocked that no single member could function alone. The Hittite Empire, one of the two superpowers of the age, could not reliably feed itself. It ran on imported grain. A letter from the Hittite court, preserved in the ruins of Ugarit, demands a grain shipment and describes it as a matter of life and death. That is not rhetoric from a poet. That is a superpower admitting, in writing, that its survival depended on someone else's harvest arriving on someone else's ships. The risks stacked quietly, the way they always do. First risk, a single strategic material with no substitute, sourced from the far end of the map. Second risk, food systems concentrated in a handful of exporters, with entire empires eating from ships. Third risk, an elite economy so interdependent that a failure anywhere became a failure everywhere. The Bronze Age had built a machine with no redundancy. It ran beautifully. It could not run damaged. Then the climate turned. Pollen samples drilled from the beds of the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea record a severe dry period beginning around 1250 BC and lasting, by some estimates, more than a century. Harvests shrank across the region at the same time. Egyptian records from around 1210 BC describe the pharaoh Merneptah shipping grain north to keep the land of the Hittites alive, an emergency bailout from one superpower to another. The buffer was already gone, and the earth itself was not finished. Archaeologists have documented a cluster of major earthquakes across Greece and the eastern Mediterranean in the decades around 1200 BC, striking cities already stretched thin. Hungry regions produce moving people. This is one of history's most reliable equations. In the records of Ramesses III at Medinet Habu, Egypt describes a confederation of raiders and migrants, arriving by land and sea, families and ox carts alongside warships. Egyptologists know them as the Sea Peoples. The inscriptions claim that no land could stand before them, and then list the fallen, Hatti, Alashia, and the cities of the coast. Historians still debate who the Sea Peoples were. The more revealing question is what they were: displaced populations moving through a system that could no longer absorb a shock. Watch how the collapse actually propagated, because the sequence is the lesson. Raiders cut a shipping lane. Tin and grain stop moving. A kingdom that cannot feed its army cannot defend its ports. Undefended ports lose more shipping. Less shipping means less bronze, less food, less tax revenue, weaker armies. Every failure caused the next one. The story everyone tells is that barbarian invaders destroyed the Bronze Age. The tablets say otherwise. The tablets show a network eating itself. Ugarit's final archive makes it painfully specific. Around 1185 BC, its last king, Amurapi, wrote to the king of Cyprus begging for help. Enemy ships had come, he reported. His cities were burning, and in the same letter, the fatal detail: his own troops were away in Hittite lands, and his own fleet was deployed elsewhere, serving alliance obligations. The network that made Ugarit rich had scattered its defenses at the exact moment it needed them. The city was destroyed shortly after. It was never rebuilt. The dominoes kept falling, and they fell fast. Cities that had stood for 500 years, through wars, plagues, and dynastic chaos, went down within a few decades of each other. Archaeologists surveying the region count dozens of destruction layers dated to this narrow window, ash and rubble sealing over palace floors from Greece to the Levant. Hattusa, capital of the Hittite Empire, was burned and abandoned around 1180 BC. The empire that had ruled Anatolia for 4 centuries simply ceased to exist. In Greece, the palaces at Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos were destroyed within roughly a generation. The last clay tablets at Pylos record watchers being posted along the coast. Then the record stops. With the palaces went the scribes, and with the scribes went writing itself. Greece lost literacy for roughly 400 years. Egypt survived the wave, barely, then slid into a long decline. Of the great powers of 1250 BC, only Assyria and Babylon limped through, diminished. Read that again. The kingdoms did not just lose wealth, some of them lost the ability to write down what they had lost. There is a name worth giving this pattern, because it did not die in 1177 BC. Call it the tin trap, a system whose strongest structures all hang from its thinnest thread. The Bronze Age powers did not fail because they were weak. They failed because they were optimized. Every efficiency they gained in good years was resilience they surrendered for the bad ones. Complexity was their greatest achievement and their fatal exposure, and the same ships that carried their prosperity carried their collapse. The aftermath, strangely, built the world we live in. With Mediterranean tin roots broken, smiths across the region were forced to work a metal they had long known but rarely mastered: iron. Iron ore, unlike tin, is found almost everywhere. Within a few centuries, the age of bronze gave way to the age of iron, a metal that no trade embargo could withhold. Small, nimble societies rose where empires had fallen. The Phoenicians, whose simplified alphabet replaced the Pylos scripts and became the ancestor of the letters on this screen. The early Israelites in the Canaanite highlands, and eventually the Greek city-states, born from the dark age that followed the palaces. The collapse cleared the board. What grew back was more decentralized, more adaptable, and harder to kill. Now set the ancient map beside the modern one. In March 2021, a single container ship wedged itself across the Suez Canal, and for 6 days, roughly $9 billion a day in global trade sat waiting behind it. In the same era, the world discovered that around 90% of its most advanced computer chips came from a single island, and when those chips ran short, car factories on 3 continents cut production by millions of vehicles. Modern manufacturing calls its philosophy just in time. The palace scribes of Pylos would have recognized it instantly. It is the same wager the Bronze Age made, that the ships will always come, that the network will always hold, that efficiency today is worth fragility tomorrow. 32 centuries later, the tin trap is still the trade we keep making. The Bronze Age is not a warning that connected systems fail. It is a warning that connected systems fail together. Every civilization in this story believed the network was too big to fail. The network believed nothing. It simply required every link to hold, and one dry decade proved that they could not. If this story changed how you see the world's supply lines, share it with someone who still thinks collapse arrives with an army. Subscribe for more forgotten economics that built and broke the ancient world, because the ledgers always tell a different story than the legends.